Hello Year 3, this week I'm going to read you a story and I've chosen for this week a book by Jonathan Mears. Jonathan Mears is the writer or the author of Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I know we're not reading it in Year 3, but I find it really funny. But this book is not Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It's called Grandpa Was an Astronaut and it's from edited by Little Gems. So it's this book. It's a chapter book, but it's a very short one. So, Grandpa Was an Astronaut by Jonathan Mears. Chapter 1, Moon Thing. It was time to get up, so Sherman got up. Then he did some stuff. Here is a list of all the stuff that Sherman did. 1. Went to the toilet. 2. Washed his hand. 3. Splashed some water on his face to wake himself up. 4. Cleaned his teeth. 5. Took off his pajamas and put some clothes on instead. 6. Went downstairs. 7. Said good morning to his mom. 8. Ate a bowl of cornflakes with sliced banana but no sugar. 9. Told his mom that he wouldn't be long. And 10. Went outside. Sherman liked to be outside. He liked to be inside too, but outside was best. Why? Because Sherman lived next to the sea in a small white house with his mom and a dog called Luna. He didn't care about the weather. Hot, cold, windy, rainy or snowy, it made no difference at all to Sherman. He liked all kinds of weather. Well, most kinds of weather anyway. But Sherman didn't like fog. Fog was rubbish because when it was foggy, Sherman couldn't see things. And Sherman liked to see things as he stood on the shingly beach and listened to the waves slurp and suck at the shore. Things like distant ships, the water spouts of passing whales and clouds that looked like sharks. But the thing that Sherman most liked to see was the moon, whether it was hanging in the sky like a sideways silver smile, or whether it was full and round and peering above the horizon like a fat creamy cheese. Sherman liked to see it, and if it was foggy, Sherman couldn't see it. That's why he didn't like fog. Plus, when it was foggy, the foghorn in the lighthouse kept Sherman awake all night and made him grumpy the next day, and his mom even grumpier. But mainly, it was the moon thing. It wasn't foggy today. Today was sunny and fine and clear. Sherman could see for miles and miles, and so he was happy, but still not as happy as he would have been if he could see the moon. Sherman had liked the moon for as long as he could remember, which wasn't all that long because he was only 7. But there was still quite a long time to remember. Grandpa said that the moon had been full and ran over 100 times since Sherman was born, and Grandpa should know. Grandpa knew lots of stuff about the moon, but then Grandpa was an astronaut. Sherman! Sherman's mom called from the back door of the small white house. Yeah, Sherman called back from the beach. I need to see you. But I've only just got here, Sherman groaned. Woof, said Luna. Woof, woof. Coming, said Sherman. Chapter 2, Many Moons Ago. Hey, guess what? Sherman's mom said when Sherman got back to the small white house. What? Said Sherman. He wasn't very good at guessing things. Grandpa just called. Really? Sherman said, and his face lit up like someone watching a firework. Sherman's mom nodded. And, Sherman said, he wondered if this was the only reason he'd been called back from the beach. He wants us to go and see him. He does, Sherman said, and his eyes twinkled like stars. Sherman's mom nodded again. When? Said Sherman. Today, said Sherman's mom. Right now, in fact. Yeah, Sherman yelled, and he did a dance that he only ever did when he was very happy, because there was only one thing that Sherman loved more than having Grandpa who was an astronaut, and that was going to see him. Of course, Grandpa wasn't still an astronaut. He'd stopped a long, long time ago, but as Grandpa would say, many moons ago. But he'd been an astronaut once upon a time, and when he was much younger, before he'd met Grandma, and long before Sherman's mom was born. Many moons ago, astronauts were celebrities. They were like pop stars, movie stars, and famous footballers all rolled into one. But these days, Grandpa could sit in a cafe drinking a coffee and reading his newspaper, and no one would know who he was. This was fine by Grandpa because Grandpa didn't like a lot of fuss and bother. To Grandpa, being an astronaut was just another job, and no more special than fixing washing machines or driving buses. Sherman kind of knew of Grandpa, what Grandpa meant. He also kind of knew that being an astronaut really was special, but that Grandpa didn't like to show off. But Sherman thought that Grandpa should show off. After all, it wasn't everyone who could say that they floated about on the moon. Only a few people in the world could say that, and Grandpa was one of them. "Let's go," Sherman's mom said, and she bundled the Sherman and Luna into the car, and off they went. Chapter 3, Real Moon Rock. When Grandpa opened the door and saw Sherman, he said that he always said. "Grandpa to Sherman, Grandpa to Sherman, come in please, Sherman." Sherman laughed like he always did. Sherman loved it when Grandpa said stuff like this. Stuff that he used to say back when he was an astronaut. And when he said it, Grandpa always covered his nose and mouth with his hand so that his voice sounded all funny and muffled, as if he was far, far away, zooming through space. "Are you receiving me, Sherman?" Grandpa said. "Receiving you loud and clear," Grandpa said. Sherman. "In that case, what are you waiting for?" Grandpa said. "Come in." When Sherman stepped inside Grandpa's house, he did what he always did and headed straight for the mantelpiece. There were two things there that Sherman liked to look at. First of all, there was the photograph, not just any old photograph. A photograph of Grandpa standing on the moon next to a flag he'd just stuck in the ground. Of course, you couldn't really tell that it was Grandpa because Grandpa was wearing his special space suit and his big round helmet. You couldn't see his face, but Sherman knew that it was Grandpa because Grandpa said it was. And that was good enough for Sherman. The other thing on the mantelpiece that Sherman liked to look at was a small glass case. In the case was a tiny lump of rock, not just any old rock, real moon rock, dusty and white, not in the last bit like cheese, but that was just a kid's story. Same as all that "hey diddle diddle" stuff and cows jumping over the moon. Sherman knew that none of that was true. "What's it like on the moon, Grandpa?" Sherman said when Grandpa came and stood beside him. "Let's find out, shall we?" said Grandpa. "Pardon?" said Sherman. "Let's find out," said Grandpa again. "How will we do that?" Sherman asked. "We'll go there," Grandpa said with a shrug of his shoulder, as if he'd just suggested they go to the swing park or the swimming pool. "Whoa," said Sherman. "Really?" "Really," Grandpa said. "How?" Sherman asked. "We'll build a spaceship," said Grandpa. "Cool," said Sherman, and so they did. Chapter 4, Blast Off. It turned out to be much easier to build a spaceship than Sherman thought it was going to be. All it took were a few cardboard boxes, a dustbin lid, a couple of chairs, and some silver foil. "See?" said Grandpa, as he and Sherman stood back and admired their handiwork. "It's not exactly rocket science." Sherman laughed in case it was a joke. He was pretty sure that it was, because Grandpa was always making jokes about space. Like, what do you do if you see a spaceman? You park man. And why are there never any parties on the moon? Because there's no atmosphere. Sherman didn't always understand Grandpa's joke, but he didn't care. They were Grandpa's jokes, so they must be funny. "All set," Grandpa said. "All set," said Sherman. "Hop in then," said Grandpa, and he stepped inside the spaceship. "Rogers," Sherman said, and he hopped in. Sherman knew that's what astronauts said instead of "okay." They said "Roger," even if the person they were speaking to wasn't called Roger. "You coming, Luna?" Grandpa said. He was Luna. "Woof," said Luna. Her tail wagged like a windscreen wiper as she jumped into the spaceship and landed at Sherman's feet. "Prepare for blast off," Grandpa said. "Are you receiving me?" "Receiving you loud and clear," said Sherman. Commencing countdown. Engines on, Grandpa said. Roger, said Sherman. 10, 9, 8, said Grandpa. 7, 6, 5, 4, said Sherman. 3, 2, 1, 0, said Grandpa. Blast off, Sherman and Grandpa yelled together. The house shook and shuddered as Grandpa, Sherman and Luna blasted off for the moon. In next to no time, they'd burst out of the cloud and they were zooming through space at an amazing speed. Soon, planet Earth looked as tiny as a golf ball below them. Are we there yet, Grandpa? Said Sherman. Grandpa roared with laughter. Are we there yet? Sherman nodded. Do you know how long it took me to get to the moon? Said Grandpa. Sherman shook his head. 3 days, said Grandpa. Whoa, Sherman said. 3 days? I know, said Grandpa. Imagine that. So Sherman did. Chapter 5, One Small Step for Dog. I will carry on chapter 5 next week. See you then, guys. Bye.